Well, I wish you'd said that, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
But I've tried to
Last
get
week,
more and
John.
more to pristine.
It was only the week before.
That was
I
the
live
last one I got.
overlooking. So
And
I
then
think
I've
I've
read
read
through,
through, but there was all, you know, I thought, oh, they're so drunk they're going to miss one. But something must have landed. The police came, things quieted down. But then an ambulance
There's one
turned
with
up
less flowers.
and
the
somebody
climate was just
walked
out
out of the ambulance and had his thumb treated. I mean, you or I would be told to go to the hospital.
30 Western ones on the list.
So the camera's on,
It's on.
and that goes in.
Yeah.
See? Yeah. We're there. Voila.
Give us a shout if you need anything. Enjoy.
Yeah, I've got the
3 of those, either at the Quinton book, so there's only 2. I found There's one with the colonnades.
Good, the door is open.
And yeah, so one's before 28, one's after 28. One after 28, the water slide. So,
Yes.
actually, there's the second one.
That's number 2.
Oh, it's am I how many get 8 minutes too? Is that? Oh, is that? Yeah. Oh well.
So,
Gosh,
you
you're
saw
all
Carol's
early,
reply to my message about Exeter.
Yeah.
But she didn't actually answer my question, how many tables are there?
I'm sorry.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so if we get a plan, we'll see exactly how many tables there are. And we'll be able to work out ourselves if they're the same ones from Yeah. But interested that PJ gave us the information, and that's 600 series, 612, 613, 615 and 616 are the different steamers in the bottom. So
There was one point they couched it in such language that only solicitors clerks could understand. Oh yes. And that's been photographed in the original.
why didn't he use it all the ones in the 790s? Because he hasn't got it.
Unfortunately, it's no longer available.
Before we go any further, can I draw your attention to the things that don't have?
Are they copies?
Oh, you're a bit quiet. They don't have anything.
Before he was canonised.
The same fellow that won 170 in 72 was signed. That man's top not even sense.
I can go into
So
my,
you suspected it
it
just...
goes into my phone under both characters.
We know it's classic.
I've messaged him twice with the same question. Which he has not.
But you think it is.
He took it right.
He sent me a coloured.
If only he were alive now. Very fashionable.
It's good, but would he? Is he? He does like London. He does like London.
Vegetarian and vegan.
The same company to me confirms your suspicion.
Well, he sent me that picture. Just after the day, said, do you think the colours are right for Fairfield at that time?
Thank you very much.
There was some party notice, that's what I got
Okay, well, that's great.
No, he,
I am.
where's that?
You'll never be able to afford it, Harold. You'll never be able to.
You can't trade it in, can you?
Yeah, I got a young one to start with.
So you say for a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. Me and my daughter. Right. It was her that wanted to
That was a I missed last week.
I was a car recently, music events and in West Street.
I've no idea, it must be you.
Yeah, well, that's right. One of the entrances in West Street, and it comes out, it used to come out on South, I think it was another entrance on South Parade. It's between West Street and South Parade. If somebody rings.
So what's down there?
Oh, there was no
Just exactly cafes and things, and next to Lloyd's Bank is the cafe. There's all sorts of cafes.
See, that's a mention of
John, did you send the PDF file of that
one of the
I had completely forgotten about that. And I had just notes to myself saying, Old Farmhouse PDF. And I put it in my pocket again tonight. I couldn't for the life of me remember what I had promised to do, who I promised to do it for.
too much champagne.
Well, it was a good night.
It was a good night, yes, it was a very good night.
Yes, the only trouble is I had to have duties. I had to have a drink before coming.
You did. I noticed you were doing a networking job before you came in
But
here.
fortunately, when I went back in, they hadn't started pudding, so at least I had the pudding. Well, I had two puddings.
You did
Somebody
your-
else on the table didn't want
Didn't want
it,
one, so that made up for the miss of the main menu, main course. But it was good. It was a good evening.
Very good.
Very good evening. Some very impressive people.
And the museum had a different as well. Yes. So it's nice to be there.
Show different films.
All right, what did I promise to do? Send you a bit, right. Right.
John.
Have I promised somebody else?
Yes, Amy.
I think then the air conditioning.
The whole room.
Then the air conditioning.
Yeah. You can work out how to open
One we've got to close it.
I'm sure I have your email on file.
You should have, yeah.
Yeah, I just typed the name in.
Can we give you?
Yeah, you haven't got mine. I'd like a.
And you want the old farmhouse as well?
Yes, please.
Right,
That's the question.
okay. Each day I get home, I empty my pockets of bits of paper with notes on them. Right. Now then, what's your email address then?
Amy 23 Evans.
Amy?
23.
A-M-E-Y?
Oh no, AMY. Anyway, the real way.
I couldn't possibly comment. Right.
Can't get the next
23
one. Don't think to retire next year.
Evans. At Gmail.
And it's in your farmhouse as well.
I was thinking,
Amy Tracy at gmail.com.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else?
No, that's my daughter, so.
Right.
on the ball there.
And not people like you were here. Actually, for the £20,
That would have been expensive.
Wish didn't do it.
there's some other members that use £6.
Not me, and just
It's over here. At pcconnect.com.
Johnson's.
Yeah.
Now, 2 copies of it. That's someone else.
And then
I was about to say 2 copies.
Maybe trying to go and be edited.
Print it off yourself.
20 years old.
Right.
after 2 o'clock you have
The thing is, it's 43 so expensive.
Got 9 just in case you hadn't noticed. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You have been eating.
Right, and there's the rest of the paper in case somebody else asks.
5, 7, 8 quid, I've got that one.
Right, okay.
You bid 12 for that, and Willie's one.
My problem tonight has been cutting down on the slides. What's that? No. Cutting down on the slide. But the trouble when you build up such a bank of information is not the problem of finding something, it's the problem of cutting stuff out. So,
consolidation.
hello? Somebody in there?
Somebody's emails like through by the sound of it.
No, I presume as it's 7 we're all here. Right, okay, let's kick off then. History lecture number.
Oh, is it the screen?
Right, well let's assume if I start that funny noise will stop. Right then, just a very, very brief outline of what we do. The Georgian period, couple of things that happened in Weston. Okay, the hotel was built and the first of the esplanades, or was a short esplanade. Into the Victorian era, very, very roughly the time when the railway arrived, included the building of Burndeck Pier and the sanatorium, right the way along to the end of the century. I mean, it's quite convenient the old Queen died at the turn of the century. It makes it much easier. So that as we then enter the 20th century, into the Edwardian time, we have things like the Grand Pier, Knightstone Theatre, baths, bandstands, everyone have a jolly good time. Then we go to war, First War. We then have what I think is the heyday, the last era of self-confidence in Weston, the between wars era. After that, I'm afraid it's downhill all the way, because that self-confidence goes. It's not our own fault, it's the way life has panned out. So, quick little resume of the Georgian period. This is Weston beginning. Remember, it started before the railway came. So people say, oh, Weston's just here because of the railway. No. The railway simply encouraged the seaside development. And it's interesting to note that way back in 1814, somebody had set aside 20 guineas to help level some of the sand dunes at the end of what is now Regent Street, was then Walsall Road, and to cover them in clay. Not so much to create a promenade, but because the sand was blowing everywhere over people's cottages, roofs are falling in, so try and solidify it by dumping clay, mud out of the sea on top of the sand dunes. I've seen no record that it worked. And then 1815, significant date, some of the dunes were levelled. The enclosure award, which had been 4 years in the making, became an act in 1815, and this really began to consolidate land in Weston and develop land. And at the same time, the first of the dune levellings took place. And 1826, very low sea wall, all the way from Knightstone to what is the thatched cottage. It was a very crude affair indeed. It was just a bit of a gravel path and a bit of a sea wall. It certainly wouldn't have held the sea back. And then 3 years later, that was extended down to Walsall Road. So we can see that Weston is beginning to realise it's going somewhere. But of course all this work is being paid for by those who owned the early hotels and the bed and breakfast establishments that were starting. And there was no way in which the place could be taxed, because there was no mechanism for taxing until the commissioners were in place. Up until then it was the church and the vestry. So this is what it would have looked like painting in Weston Museum. You can see the entrance to what today is the Knightstone, but this is clearly before the raising of the causeway. If you wanted to get to Knightstone then, you waited till the tide was out and you walked along the shingle causeway, or if the tide was in, you had to take a boat. It wasn't until Mr. Pruin bought it and built the proper causeway, which is the base of the causeway we walk along today to Knightstone. So this painting clearly predates that, and you can see this early prom, which is here, working its way around. And this is a wonder. This is a typical Western donkey cart. It's not for tourism. It's the way around. You hired a chairwoman or a chairman. When you see people described as chairman or chairwomen, that's not say they're in charge of a society or a club. They're taxi drivers. That's what they do. So let's start with the Georgian period in 2 minutes. We'll get straight into the Victorian period. And again, some of these paintings. Sorry, this is just the
that's fine. The other one's wider actually.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, the other one's wider.
Oh, sorry.
It's that one.
It's that one.
Sorry.
Right. We have to take art for what it is, and these are not particularly great paintings, but they're all we have, and they're in the museum. Robert Gregory, this is annoying me as well, but I don't know what to do. Robert Gregory, local builder, local carpenter, and a bit of an amateur artist as well. But you can see the point here, that here's the beach, and there's a bit of a sort of shingly wall, and not much else. This is St John's Church, a bit closer to the sea than it actually is, and working your way down to this is probably into, yes, this is going to be Victoria Crescent. There's the County Hotel, so this is working your way around into West Street. Bit of artistic license, but there we are. I've shown this one before. This is my favourite painting. This to me is the whole point of a seaside. You go there to relax. You go there to lounge on the beach and just enjoy yourselves. It's why in Weston-super-Mare we're all fairly lethargic. You know? We don't worry about things. We just, forget it, we'll do it tomorrow, manana. And this typifies the whole thing. 1860, Henry Hopkins picture, and this is before our present promenade. So you can see here, very short, stumpy wall, gravel, and this would be today's Grand Atlantic, then the college, and looking a bit closer. Again, this print shows quite nicely how the sand dunes are coming all the way up towards this would be Emmanuel Church. This would be to the Beach Hotel, which was the old assembly room, St John's Church there. Villa Rosa up there, Claremont House here, but definitely here it's sand dunes right the way up to that crude early sea wall. A better quality print. This is working our way around what today we would call Glentworth Bay, Marine Lake. This is Glentworth Bay, moving around towards Anchor Head, and Claremont House there, that later became Claremont Crescent. Again, you can see Villa Rosa up there, and Raglan Terrace here, and these individual houses.
what was Villa Rosa?
Villa Rosa is where the Villa Rosa block of flats is now. It was a huge mansion, and a magnificent house. It only came down in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and the gate lodge is still there. It's called Villa Rosetta, and for a gate lodge it's a pretty substantial house by today's standards. But that, I mean, Mrs. Rook, she liked to be known as Lady Rook, she is reputed to have kept a bear pit there. I don't think she ever did.
Is that where that bridge is?
That's it.
Road?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that was her bridge. So she could go from her mansion across the bridge to her apricot garden without needing to meet people in the road. She was a rather exclusive.
It's not public access, is it, that bridge?
Sorry?
It's not public access, that bridge, is it?
No, it's a private bridge, and it goes from nowhere to nowhere. So it goes from one garden to another, but I don't think you can. And I'm not actually sure who owns it on one side or the other.
Probably the Michaels.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into the Michael's garden, but it also goes into the Villa Rosa. I don't know. And here's a print of the same era. Now, this is quite clearly working your way down to Royal Crescent here, and you can see it's not the wall we have now. It's an earlier wall and a gravel drive. Another good picture of Weston, and you can see here in the distance the bathing machines. So this is what the seaside is all about, isn't it? It's about relaxation, it's about playing on the beach, and it's about kids enjoying themselves, building sandcastles. And this is what the seaside has become. We have invented it. Now, the big date for Weston's progress is really 1885, so we're a long way into Weston. Weston had become a town in the 1840s. Here we are, nearly half a century, 20 years later, quarter of a century, let's not exaggerate, getting to that point where the council, the Urban District Council now, wants to have a comprehensive seafront scheme all the way from Burnbeck right the way down to the sanatorium. Now this is a huge undertaking, hugely unpopular in Weston. Ratepayers up in arms about having to pay for these things. In any case, we don't want the holiday makers coming here. They just bring trouble. Same old, nothing changes, does it? And so the council employed Scoones, who was a Bristol engineer and of great significance. I mean, he was a very well-regarded engineer. And these are his actual drawings for designing the seafront. Now, in those days, compared with plans that have to be drawn up nowadays when a council wants to do something, I mean, reams and reams and reams of documentation. There, it's not exactly the back of a fag packet, but I think a lot of it was a case of drawing up the plans, and as you worked your way along and bumped into problems, you dealt with them there and then. Okay, if a few people died in the process, well, so what? But this is not only did he design the wall, but he designed everything else, like the shelters, the way in which benches could be tucked with a wall behind. So if it was a windy day, you could still sit there, but you had the protection. I mean, really well thought out. And here, the cross section. Very sensibly, he had designed a wall which was vertical on the landward side, but slightly sloping on the seaward side. Very sensible engineering process. As we all know, when waves come in, they come and break this way, so they take, the energy comes in there and then they scour at the bottom and back out. That's the way a wave hits. So if you've got a wall shaped slightly curved, it will take the impact of the wave, it will help dissipate the energy. And that wall has lasted from 1885, and with one or two fairly minor breaches, it's been perfect all the way along. And these are, I've just enlarged these sketches to show you the care he took with his designing. The ladies' cloakroom, which is a euphemism, isn't it, for the loo. But what a pity we've lost. I mean, there's a hint of the Great Western Railway about this style, isn't there? It's and again, those very well designed. And these are prints. These are going to be 1880s, showing the wall as it was. I mean, they're idealised because they're clearly prints rather than photographs. But now we can see the whole idea of the way this new promenade was being laid out, the way they've used the natural flow to create the curves, and the gardens coming down at the Roselle area. Interesting how that gradually changed, because you see the lawns to start with, the seaside benches, and then you begin to see shelters appearing. So things change all the time. I mean, that shelter is no longer there, but that shelter is. Still, these shelters have gone. You can now see the island has been linked by the causeway, and this huge advert, swimming baths, and on the other side as well. And these were open air baths. I mean, this is Dr. Fox's bath house, but around the back here there was an open air pool before they built the baths in the beginning of the 20th century. Another view. And working your way along the new promenade, this is coming up towards the thatch cottage there. Not quite sure whether hansom carriages were meant to stay on the left-hand side or the right-hand, but these both appear to be on the wrong side of the road. And a drinking fountain, which had been put in. We've lost all those bits of street furniture. Such a shame, because they helped to make the street look interesting. And onto the beach lawns. Of course, the scheme was not just the promenade, it was also the beach lawns. But as I told you, was it last week or the week before, the lawns were initially private. The use of them was reserved to the people whose properties abutted them. But nobody could stop tourists going on them, so they just gave up, and then the council took over maintenance. And the history of the public opening of the grand seafront scheme at Weston-super-Mare, 1885 by Cock Robin. Oh yeah. Author of Who Opened the Clifton Suspension Bridge, The Legend of the Little Black Boy, The Mare at Sea, Hans Brittman at Weston-super-Mare, etc., etc., dedicated to the town commissioners of Weston-super-Mare, price 6 pence. Nobody dedicates any publication to the councillors of Weston-super-Mare now, but they did in those. They were hoping to get a bit of money, you see. And here now we have photographs. This, I think, is a wonderful photograph. It's actually, they're constructing the sea wall. And if you look carefully, well, I think on the next photograph I've actually pointed things out. Yes, I have. There we've got the hotel field, the Sandringham Hotel, and the college, which later morphs, just after this, the same sort of period, morphs into the Grand Atlantic Hotel. And this photograph, this must have been taken in about, the year it was about 1885, because if you look at the right-hand side, there, they're still actually building the wall. So you can see the stonemasons are here. This is Glentworth Hall, which of course no longer exists. So we go back, there it is. And what was then known as Glentworth Bay, today we call Marine Lake, working. It's interesting, if you look at this photograph, and then we go back to the other one, see how the Claremont vaults have changed. Buildings are always changing. This is how we help to date photographs as well. And again, since the previous photograph, the shelter's gone there. And it's not colour photography, it's that wonderful way in which they painted black and white photographs, helps bring them alive. Though I must say, I'm hugely impressed the way television now is able to turn black and white film, war film into colour. It's really, really impressive.
Crowded.
And this whole thing which has been invented called promenading. The French promenade in their grand boulevards, or along their really classy sea fronts at Saint-Tropez or Cannes. But we did the same. And of course Weston lends itself to promenading because we've got this wonderful long stretch of flat road and footpath, which a lot of resorts don't have. You go to somewhere like Bournemouth, and you've got to go down the cliffs to get to the Chine, haven't you? It's so. We're very lucky here with that. And so promenading is the thing, as we all know. People still do it. I mean, I'm always pleasantly surprised on a nice summer Sunday, and the seafront is heaving with people who are doing nothing more than walking from A to B and back to A. It's one of those things we enjoy doing. And another museum painting, these wonderful sunsets we have. All Glentworth Bay, of course, predating Marine Lake, and another view a bit later on, 1860. Again, you can see the Claremont Vaults building just on the right there, and a little later. And here we have a photograph, rather than a print. It's a bit grainy, but it's still a photograph of Glentworth Bay. You can see the tide coming in. It's a shingle bay. So it wasn't a sandy beach. That didn't happen until we brought sand in artificially. And here you can see this very tidy. And people looking at these photographs would say, oh, why isn't it as clean as that today? Well, the answer is that these photographs were taken immediately the work was finished, and therefore it was pristine. And who takes photographs of messy places? When you buy postcards, they're only postcards which are good shots, otherwise I wouldn't have to sell them. And likewise these pictures. So it's very important to compare like with like rather than look back and say, oh, wasn't it wonderful then and it isn't now. And that again, see the change there. And this great house built for one of the Western developers, Mr. Cox, Glentworth Hall, which was a really magnificent house. Should never have been pulled down. And there we are. And working your way around Madeira Cove back into town. And the way in which people needed to shelter. Here, something's gone wrong with that photograph.
Nice reflection.
Yes, something.
Your shadow.
But it's these chairs. I think they were all lost in the 1903 storm. But it strikes me they're ideal for the beach because whichever way the wind is blowing, you can just turn it around. But I'm sure where the devil they managed to stack them all at night, I have no idea. So, now, look very carefully this way. So I was trying to work out the date of this photograph, and then I suddenly realised, this is the building stone. They are still actually building the prom. So I reckon what happened is the photographer came along as the work had finished and took a series of good photographs, turned many of them into postcards, and there they are. So this I think we can date very carefully, very easily to the date when the prom is being constructed. And again, how clean, how pristine it is. But then the new prom, when it was relaid a few years ago with the Chinese granite, was exactly the same. It was pristine until people started putting their chip fat all over it. And here we are again by that shelter and this fountain. Again, we've reinvented them, haven't we? Because now we've all become more environmentally conscious, and we say, well, why don't we walk around with our own bottles, which we can fill up from public water? We're reinventing the wheel all the time. It's fascinating. Mind you, there was a plan to put a replacement fountain there in honour of the Smith Pigots, and a public subscription was commenced so people could put money in to build this huge memorial to the Smith Pigots. And nobody contributed anything, so they never built it. And again, a museum painting. No idea who the artist is, but it's 1885. So whoever painted this must have gone along. The sea wall's been built, so I will go and paint this sea wall. I mean, nowadays it's just everybody goes along with the smartphones, and it's millions and millions of photographs are taken of exactly the same thing, all uploaded on social media as though we actually wanted to look at them. And the method of conveyance, again, it's quite a change, isn't it, from what we expect nowadays, but there we are. And back to that fountain. I mean, I can date it now because that photograph tells us the drinking fountain erected, this one, by public subscription in 1860. I suppose we would call it crowdfunding, wouldn't we? You know, if we wanted to put a facility on the seafront, council doesn't have any money, let's see if the public will pay for it. And they did. Sometimes. And once you've got this rather elegant promenade and it's paved, you can have all sorts of events taking place. And here, a very, very popular cycling event. The bicycle became very popular. Penny farthings, the new bone shakers. And Western Museum has a wonderful collection of these conveyances. Most of them all now down at Taunton. If the museum is ever, the second phase is ever built. then some of these things will come back. But it's wonderful, isn't it? And you look at the way people are dressed. You've got this mix of people really in their rather old-fashioned toppers and the new breed in their different hats and slightly less formal. Some of them look a little rakish, but and then the new cyclists with their caps. These again, you can date that from the clothing, can't you? And I think the weather must have just started turning. There we are. And the Western Wheelers, it was a hugely popular thing. People went off on their bicycles. Other forms of conveyance, of course, developed. Taxi cabs, hackney carriages. And as time moved on, we became more mechanised. So the done thing was to own a motor car. Forms of transport and forms of individual transport are constantly changing. Who knows where we will be in 30 years' time? I doubt very much we'll all be driving around in individual cars by then, but I won't be here then. So, but I mean, look at these wonderful vehicles. It must have been great fun driving around in those days, because only people with money could do it, and therefore the roads were open. But they all seem to be open air, don't they? Perhaps they have more.
On the left there, this steering wheel is in the centre.
So it is. Made for international travel. It doesn't matter which country we're in. Yes. And then same shop, but just a little later, you can see the cars are beginning to change. But we've still got this wonderful sort of charabanc idea that single-decker coaches would have the roof off. And what a lovely way to go around. And promenading. And I love this photograph, because here does this lady know the photographer? She looks a very, very elegant, self-assured, professional sort of woman, doesn't she? And this chap here is saying, he said, look at her across there. You can read, can't you? And a bit further along, the same era, again, promenading. I always remember as a kid, my sister and I would be taken along the prom on a Sunday afternoon when we were sort of that time, and Dad would say, breathe in. Of course I'm breathing in. Shoulders back. And of course the idea, these ladies are not sheltering from the weather, they're sheltering from the sunshine. They didn't know it at the time, but how sensible. They were doing it because, of course, they didn't want to look brown, because that would have implied they were working class from the fields or the sea. So they needed to keep their pale complexion to show they were not manual workers. And the beach lawns, as they were open, these are the private lawns, fenced and walled. You see nobody. I mean, this must have been taken fairly early in the day, mustn't it? Because there's just nobody there. But try keeping the public off something as open as that. It was rather like the Smith Pigots trying to keep the public out of Western Woods. They quickly gave up.
Before the pier as well? There's no pier on that one, so no pier.
No, this is pre-1903, so yep. And the lawns created 1885 as part of the seafront scheme, opened to the public by 1910. So, and here in this photograph, they're clearly posing, aren't they, in that wonderful way. They have to remain stationary for however many seconds it is till the photographer comes from underneath there and says, and quickly the beach lawns become hugely popular as a venue to meet. You're not on the sand, it's not blowing, you're on the grass, and here is a temporary bandstand which was put up on the beach lawns. And again, this is typical of what every seaside resort would have had in terms of entertainment. So let's move on to the great schemes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the piers because you'd go on forever and ever. But just to say that in 1845, so the railway had arrived 3 years before, 1841, 4 years before, and the company set up the Western-super-Mare Packet Station Landing Pier and Slip Company with James Dredge as the engine. What a wonderful name!
What a good
It's,
name for an engineer.
James Dredge, the engineer. He's brought in from Bath and Bristol and designs a chain link suspension bridge from Claremont or from Burnbeck, from Claremont across to Burnbeck Island, and he was copying Brunel's idea for the Clifton suspension bridge. Clearly, this didn't take off. It was going to be the second chain pier in Britain, and as with so many Victorian ideas, they put the foundation stones in, it just got washed away. The thing just didn't have enough money, didn't have enough hard engineering, and it was a complete waste, and Dredge went off to somewhere else. Then, of course, Weston went rather upmarket and employed the country's doyen of pier building, Eugenius Birch, the greatest pier engineer in the country. 1867, Burnbeck Pier opens, and it's an amazing pier. When you think, I mean, the condition it's in now is dreadful, but it is still standing. I mean, the way he designed those supports for minimum interaction between the tides and the structure itself, and they're still basically sound. It's interesting. The later North Jetty is the one that is in dire straits and has planning permission for demolition. But here we have Burnbeck looking less sorry for itself than it is now looking. But amazingly, this is over 40 years since steamers first arrived in Weston. So they would arrive at places like Knightstone and get people off the boats by rowing boats back. It's, I mean, nothing that would today meet standards of public safety, but hey ho. And the pier was a very important way of getting people into Weston. It brought to us. Remember, the reason for building seaside piers initially was because they predated the railway, and so if you wanted to go from London to the resorts closest to London, you caught a ship and you went down the Thames and around to the jetties at the various seaside resorts which were building up. It's only when the railways came that we were able to move people by land much more quickly. Then, of course, when the motorways came, that destroyed the railways. So, and here's the pier. Lovely photograph. I mean, of course, the island much later on had the concrete jetty, and this is a photograph of the trowel used by Cecil Hugh Smith Piggott, who was the son of the Lord of the Manor. He laid the foundation stone, and that's the silver trowel which is still in the Mayor's Parlour. And they wouldn't allow the Lord of the Manor himself to lay the foundation stone because he was so unpopular. But they allowed his son. I mean, the poor lad was, I think, 6 or 7, and he had to stand there with hundreds of people around with a bit of cement on this thing and make a speech. Poor lad. And then the town had a holiday, and all the school kids were given threepence on a sticky bun, and we used to do things in style then. Could you imagine the council saying, "Oh, when we open the Italian Gardens, well, the whole town will have a holiday. We'll pay for you all to have a day off work." And the pier, of course, then extended to have this south jetty, which went out into the lower water. And you can see this paddle steamer, how it's clearly arriving at low water, but could. And again, no access issues were considered important. So if you got off the ship there, you had to walk up these steps. A bit like at Clevedon Pier today when the tide is out. But that jetty proved less than workable, and the finances were going haywire. But the other thing with Burnbeck Pier, it wasn't simply a pier for ships to tie. You don't make money out of landing fees. The idea is, if all the people are coming from Wales by ship, the pier company don't actually want them to go into Weston. They want them to stay on the pier. Therefore, you provide entertainment on the pier. So it gradually became a landing jetty and a fun palace. And you have alcohol. And you make sure you sell lots of it on a Sunday, because Wales is Methodist and pubs weren't open until 1960 something on Sundays. So you come and have a day here. And then you get the lifeboat there. There's the first lifeboat station. Then 1901, the second station there. Plus, of course, all these wonderful attractions. I mean, it's, none of this would be permitted to nowadays with health and safety regs. And if you put in a planning application now to build that on the side of Burnbeck Pier, a Grade 2 listed bit, it wouldn't pass muster, would it? But it's funny, isn't it? I mean, that's an incredibly ugly thing. But if it were there today, the original, it would be listed, and we wouldn't be able to tamper with it. It's because it's old. And you know, quite how secure these things were. Then the Grand Pier, 1903. This is a photograph of the actual laying of the foundations of the building begins. So here, Sandringham Hotel there. This is the seafront. The crowds are there, and somebody's making a grand speech and putting the first lump of coal in the oven to drive the cranes. And so 7th of November 1903. So that's, of course, this was a problem. Competition with the other pier. Now, the nation's wealth was based on competition. It was fairly unregulated competition at that stage. And the two piers got into terrible difficulty competing one with the other. So, let's move on to the Edwardian period. Period of tremendous, not tremendous frivolity, but certainly seasides were places of frivolity. End of the Boer War, up to the First War, the Fat King is on the throne, corpulent old Edward. It's all a bit of a hoot at the seaside. It's not a bit of a hoot in any other, certainly in the cities, but the seaside. Seaside is about escape. It's about escapism. It's about make pretend. It's about saving up your sixpence a week for your annual holiday and going down and pretending you're in the south of France and you're having a real wow of a time, and you do have a wow of a time, but the day of reckoning comes at the end of the week when you have to go home and start working again and saving your sixpences again. So seasides were about offering something to people which they wouldn't ordinarily have, and doing it in a way which would excite them. And that's, again, the seaside formula, isn't it? So, here's the pier, the Grand Pier. I mean, what could be a more frivolous bit of wedding cake design than this? It's sort of in imperial India. You could almost see the elephants coming up in the Raj, and or is it Hollywood, or is it make pretend? Is it cardboard? If you push it, will it all fall over? Nothing is meant to be permanent. But it's wonderful. And Regent Street Pier, to start with, then became the Grand Pier. And hugely well-known engineers, again, building it. Why was it built? Well, it wasn't built to attract steamers, though there was one short period when the pier was extended for that. It was a complete business failure. It predates the arcades, the penny and the slot machines, and so it's about having a theatre. So here on the Grand Pier is an opera house and theatre. So you went to the pier for the theatre. That was the done thing, and this is the inside of the Grand. All of this, of course, all this Rococo stuff, it's all completely false. It's just tin. And it's a bit like going into have you been to the Curzon Cinema in Clevedon? Wonderful cinema, and you think, oh, this lovely detailing on the walls. You go and touch it, it's tin, and it's just been tacked on. Because if you're in a cinema, it's dark, you don't know, it just looks good. Same with piers, so it looked good. But they had big names here. I mean, just as the Odeon later on had the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, so the big entertainers were here. You know, Paul Robeson. And many of them, Dame Clara Butt, and the bandstands. This was the equivalent of going to T4 on the beach. Or, you know, it was live music. Music had to be live. There was no other way of listening to it. And here you can see the pier is then extended. I mean, this is the end of the pier today. Look at that. That was an enormous jetty. It was built specifically to compete with Burnbeck Pier, and one ship tied up The tidal race was so severe that skippers refused to tie up. So they had invested all of that money. Complete nonsense. But that was the spirit of the age. At Knightstone, again we're in this Edwardian period, the idea of building theatres starts to, purpose-built theatres, so this one is built. Remember that we hadn't got a theatre in Weston, because the Playhouse wasn't there then, the Playhouse was the old Market House, so this became a very important, I mean, big names again here, but it was always making a loss, because it was dependent on the season. If you had a lot of people coming in, fine, but if the weather was too nice, they wouldn't go to the theatre. So you wanted to get the crowds in during nice weather, then you wanted it to rain while they were here. So they would have to go to the theatre. But you didn't want the weather to be too severe, because walking along the causeway to get to the theatre would put people off. So it was all up to God and the weather. Interestingly, they built this as a sort of carriageway, so carriages could come in. And it was complete fear. They took it down within 1 year. And that's the same site today. So very little's changed externally, of course. Internally, it's very different. That's what it was like. So it was a big theatre, 1,000 seats plus. It was a big, big theatre. But as television began to compete, and as foreign holidays began to compete, there were constant problems with financing throughout the 60s and the 70s, and then no longer could they afford to have the best stars because they were demanding too much, so you ended up with second-rate shows. You relied more and more on local amateur dramatics, which were good but didn't bring the crowds in from outside. And the baths next door, they were built 1902. The idea the councils should have interest in people's health, that's fairly new, and therefore swimming was considered to be of public benefit. And so here municipal baths are built, and this grand fellow on the top of them is of course the Knight of Knightstone. It's a complete sham. When they were building Dr. Fox's bathhouse, they came across a skeleton. I mean, it was a huge Iron Age skeleton. Man was about 7 feet tall, buried in such a way that he clearly had been a chieftain of some sort. But the story started to go around that he was a Roman knight. Well, he wasn't. He was much older than Roman. And how do we know it? You know, so they hit on the idea that this is Knightstone, and that name has stuck. Others say, oh no, it's because the stone was dark, but the actual reason is probably lost. But it's more like this. So this is meant to be the Knight of Knightstone, and of course, as typical with a local authority, if you open something, you must do it with style and have people thanking you for doing it. So the grand opening of the Swain Baths. Many of us will remember those baths, because they only closed down in the 80s, 90s when Hutton Moor opened. And there we are. Coming to Glentworth Bay then. Glentworth Bay, like the rest of Weston, when the tide was out, and for a long time the council had thought of ways in which they could trap the water in. Here you see another view of it, the tide's out. All these people with those wonderful baskets again. So we move into this period, end of the First World War and between the Second World War. I reckon these 2 decades, this is Weston's heyday. It was the last time we exuded self-confidence, and we really did pack a punch in self-belief then. Here was a scheme, goes back as early as 1871, to trap the water in between Knightstone Island and across towards Anchor Head. So this is a scheme which never saw the light of day. You can see these sort of little harbours inside. But the idea was sown in people's minds. So come 1927, you see this from the Weston-super-Mare Gazette. Weston had 2 papers then, the Gazette and the Mercury. and this shows what is being intended. A new wall along here, Knightstone Island there, new sand there which would be brought in, and the promenade here with various facilities on the slopes down to it. So this is basically the plan that Weston went along with. Why? Well, because obviously we wanted to attract tourists and make sure they enjoyed their stay when the tide was out. But the other thing is, government was very worried. This is a period when we're only a decade after the Russian Revolution. Government is very worried about trade union problems in England, or in Britain, very worried about insurrection, and there's unemployment, very, very severe unemployment. And government sends around to all councils saying, can you all come up with job creation schemes? We need to have people working. And so in Weston, that was ideal, because Weston could then apply for government money, just as we have to do today when we want to do something. And you apply for government funding for this scheme. Government officials came and said, yep, that's a good idea, we'll give you the grant aid to do it. And unemployed Welsh coal miners were brought over to Weston to build it. And so this is the plan, and here they are actually laying that bridge. And you can see the engineer in his +4s, laying the causeway. Simple idea, causeway with sluice gates, tide comes in, and then stays in there. And the idea is that at the end of the season, you open the sluice gates and the water goes out and takes all the mud out with it. It's a lie. You don't have to. We all know that doesn't happen, and what you have to do is dredge the mud out. That name again, dredge. So this is what it looked like come the 1930s. 1920s it starts, and then a bit later on we put the decking out from the original sea wall a bit further out and suspended on pillars, so you can actually get underneath here. And then there are slides into the water. There's a little area here of buildings, and you paid to go in here. And I can remember as a kid, we were supposed to pay 6pence to go in there. Nobody ever did, of course, because you simply went along there and jumped in the water and swam around. It was like complete. And then underneath here it became sort of dank, sordid area, and that was seaweed, and of course the mud. As we all know, when the tide comes in, it has more energy, so it can bring the silt in. An ebbing tide has less energy, it can't carry the silt out with it, so it dumps the silt. And so tide after tide after tide builds up the mud layer. And in the end, the council realised the only way to get rid of the mud was to put in some sort of contraption there with a very basic wooden shovel, and it just pulled the mud across. And that was the winch house. Which was there up until Knightstone was rebuilt when Redrow came on. But it was never very successful, and even in more recent times it's always been a problem how to get the silt out, and now we've reached that position where we've got to do it again because it is full of mud. It's expensive. So here we have Glentworth Bay turned into Marine Lake, and you can see the crowds on a summer's day, on a hot day, when the tide was out. Marine Lake, it was heaving with people, and there were boats and kids enjoying themselves. Of course, the great thing is with the lake and with the tide that the water, the drop, the gradient of the beach is so gentle that it's not a dangerous beach to be on. And that's the lake as we now know it. So, other forms of entertainment. So the idea of summer and winter gardens took off in the late 19th century, and here was Weston's original gardens. 1928 opened here, not opened 1920, opened 1881, but along the boulevard, not where the winter gardens currently are. It was considered, well, that was the hotel field, and so they couldn't acquire it. But also people thought if you have too many gardens on the seafront where it's blustery and you want people there in the winter as well, so build it slightly inland. So this became the seasonal gardens with this rather wonderful Hans Fowler Price entrance. and inside the Victoria Hall, it was used for all sorts of things, from roller skating to exhibitions. It became a theatre, became a cinema. Unfortunately, 1942 it was bombed. So here's the view in the boulevard, looking up through that rather nice structure, which is now, of course, the site for Tivoli House, the 1980s block. And there's the last photograph of something, a bohemian love, a bit risque for Weston-super-Mare, isn't it? But there we are. And this is the era, don't forget, it's the roaring 20s, it's the jazzy 30s. What better era to design something like the Winter Gardens Ballroom? And so 1920s, late 20s, in this comes. And I won't dwell on this because we've dealt with it before. The Hotel Field is acquired, the Winter Gardens Pavilion is built, the Italian gardens are laid out with the Italian balustrading from Beddington House in Croydon, which is why it's called the Italian Gardens, and we all know how it's altered there. And these were genuine gardens then. And when people talk about, oh, why can't we go back to what it was? I don't think they quite realise we have moved on half a century. Going back to that is something that most of us will not remember. In any case, nobody could afford to maintain that sort of gardening nowadays. And so you can see. And inside, as those of you who walked around week before last, you'll see all these wonderful bits of 1920s material, including the lamps, the uplighters, since restored, made by Crow and Green, who were based in Baker Street. So, carrying on in this era, Belvedere, which was a huge house I showed you last week, and Sidmouth House next door to it, they were demolished to make way for our new bus station. So you can see the remains of the old properties. Bus station comes in here for the Bristol Omnibus and Traction Company. And when people say, oh, why can't we have another bus station there? Well, it's because the bus company owned it. The council didn't own it. And the bus company said, why do we need a bus station on the seafront? Sell it, which is what they did, and made money out of the sale. It was well used, but it was mainly used by coaches coming in. I mean, most people didn't catch the bus there, they caught a coach. And then, not long after that, in 1930, the Grand Pier burns down. It was a very, very cold day. The fire hydrants had frozen. Fire brigade couldn't get the water to it, and as happened much later in our time, once the wind is sucked up underneath the pier that's on fire, there's nothing to stop it, and so the pier went up in flames, which then, of course, led the pier owners to be able to look at a new design. So instead of having the old pier design with a theatre on it, they said, no, come on, life has moved on. We're moving into the era of cinemas, and a theatre just won't work. So let's go for the newfangled American type thing, amusement arcade. And so they come up with various plans in the new Art Deco style. But this is interesting. This is the actual document. People are sent this to have their views. Does this interest you? And this is Sir Lyndon Macassey, KC, King's Counsel. Great objections to the pier, to the design. It all went up as far as the Lords. And this is the Art Deco scheme that was eventually submitted. But this is from the council document, and you can see what somebody has scrawled across it. Disapproved by the council. They didn't want this modern design. They wanted a reproduction Edwardian facade. They didn't like this newfangled style. And yet we have grown up to think, heavens, that Art Deco stuff is really okay now. So all you have to do in life is wait 50 years, and then the things we hate, you then like. And so it became this Art Deco pier, and again, we know what's happened more recently. And interestingly, when the Michael family rebuilt it, they didn't go in for a reproduction old Art Deco, they went in for a new pier, and all the facilities in there were of this age rather than trying to capture something of a previous age. Another thing, the opening of an aerodrome. Here was Weston Council, 40,000 people living in Weston-super-Mare, and they decide to raise a local rate to build their own airport. And here, 1936, we open the Weston-super-Mare Municipal Aerodrome. And these are the sorts of planes. I mean, this was the era of these wonderful men in their flying machines, and it was all bit sort of hey-ho chaps and chocks away, but it was exciting. Got it new. And Weston rapidly became the second most important aerodrome in England after Croydon, which is today's Gatwick. People came to Bristol Airport, which was then at Whitchurch, well, nothing compared with Weston. If you wanted to go to Paris, you flew from Weston. You went to Cardiff every 10 minutes. There was a plane to Cardiff. It was that sort of regularity. It was hugely popular. And the buildings, some of the buildings, of course, are still, the control tower's been restored. It's now at the Helicopter Museum. The airport itself has gone, but where the runway was, that road is now called the runway, because so we've maintained that. And it was very much the spirit of the age, and all designed by the council's local surveyor. Didn't go out to international competition, he just did it. And here, look at this. First commercial flight. This is the poster, 36,000 passengers. Weston to Cardiff in 10 minutes. Weston to Birmingham, 40 minutes. Weston to Paris, direct, 150 minutes. Air charters anyway. Airport entirely open to the public, fully licensed restaurant. That was probably for the pilots as well. But there we are. Can you imagine a town half our present population building its own airport? Here's another thing. The next year, we decide we'll build an open air pool, because to keep up with the times, you must have an open air pool, a Lido. Remember, this is the era of the body beautiful. This is the era when fascism is rising, when it's very sort of dramatic. You prance around semi-naked and show your body. It was the age of the poser, and what better place to pose than in an open air Lido? And so Weston decided, yeah, we'll have one as well. But we'll not just have a Lido, we'll not just have one that's like everybody else, we'll have the most magnificent one we can pay for. And if we can't even pay for it, we'll still build it, and we'll make the ratepayers cough up a bit more. And so they did. And the water at 15 feet deep, diving stage, highest diving stage in Europe, 40 feet high. We didn't want to compare with Torquay. We wanted to compare ourselves with the Côte d'Azur, and so here it is. And look at this is my favourite poster of all time. This is Weston really understanding its marketing strategy. It's sophisticated. The seagull is tipping this champagne coupe. Not a modern champagne flute, but the proper coupe. And she's clearly oozing sophistication. And here, Weston-super-Mare. For literature, apply to G.E. Orton, train services, etc. And it's. I wish I had the original of that. They're worth a fortune nowadays. But it's such a wonderful. And we hit this very simple 3-word marketing slogan. Air like wine. And it worked. People came to Weston, and it still is. I mean, why don't we use it today? I mean, go and live in Bath, the city centre of Bath. It's beautiful, and George and all the rest, but you'll probably die way before anyone in Weston, because the air is so polluted. And this was the pool. Okay, it wouldn't work today because you'd need to have 100 or so lifeguards, and people wouldn't be able to. And occasionally somebody did a belly flop and they ended up in the hospital. And of course, we have a romantic view of it. I mean, I can remember as a kid, it was okay occasionally, but God, the water was cold. And if it wasn't sunny, you didn't want to go. And the idea that it was always full, just not true. But it was a stunning location. And the buildings were great. And as for that diving stage, I mean, that was a work of art, and demolished 1982. Apparently because it had concrete cancer, but I think the council at the time just wanted out. It was becoming expensive, and typical of not just local but typical of municipal government everywhere. There's never enough money spent on maintenance. So you build something, and then half a century later you think, it's falling to bits. Why didn't we? Well, but there we are. And it had wonderful attractions. I mean, Diana Dawes, she rose to fame there. She was born Diana Fluck, had to change her name because of sort of spelling mistakes, but she was born Diana Fluck in Swindon, and at the age of 14 or something, came to Weston, took part in a modern Venus beauty competition, and lied about her age and came third and was talent spotted, and she rose to fame as a result of being here. And when she became an international star, whenever she performed at the Hippodrome in London, in Bristol, would always stay the night in Weston. She'd never stayed in Bristol Hotel, always came back to Weston because it held such pleasant memories for her. And when the Tropicana was built after the closure of the open air pool, she came and reopened it, but she was in poorly and had cancer. So Lauren Hardy, they were there. Haile Selassie, he was booted out of Abyssinia when the Italians took over in the war. He was brought to England and he lived in Bath. He visited Weston regularly. There was a rumour that he was thinking of buying a house here. I don't know if it's anything more than a rumour, but certainly he enjoyed coming to the open air pool. And His Imperial Majesty would turn up, and the flunkies, the Emperor of Abyssinia's here, you better come to the front, sir. And he wouldn't. No, I'm a guest in your country, I'll stay in the queue, I'll pay my £half-crown as I go in. So he would talk with the Birmingham holidaymakers, and this is the Emperor of Ethiopia, yes, I'm coming in for a swim. Oh yes, pull the other one. I was. And we're going to put a blue plaque up there now, and the Rastafarians are all in favour of it, because he's their hero, so... But seaside music, again, it's all part of entertainment, and this was the Grove Park Pavilion, which is where the car park is now. It received a direct hit in the war, made of all glass, so that was the end of it, and now it's a car park. This is the bandstand on the Grand Pier. And the pavilion at the Cove became known as the Cove, Madeira Cove. This was called the Dutch oven, you can see why. And it changed over time. There's again and again, and then it became the Roselle Music Gardens, which many of us will remember. Big outdoor place to go on a Sunday afternoon. It was very pleasant, but of course it lost money, and it wasn't maintained properly. And then we had that terrible storm in '81, which destroyed much of that part. And you can see this aerial photograph. I mean, it's a substantial music garden, and there it is towards the end of its life, when all of this overhang was destroyed in that storm. So it had to come down. You can see Glentworth Hall has already gone and been replaced by that rather aesthetically challenging block of flats. Cinemas. Our very first cinema opened in 1911, where the Odeon is, and it was called the Electric Cinema. And you can see they're showing the Pedlar. The next one to open in 1913 is the Regent Street Picture House, which later became the Gaumont. And towards the end of its life, it became a bingo hall. It's been completely removed, and now it's part of that sort of Regent Street. Well, okay, I'll keep them now. So that's the only picture I've ever seen of the inside. I can remember the Gaumont, but the trouble is, memories of the insides of cinemas are a bit hazy, because they were dark when you go in and dark when you come out. So, and the Central, I remember this. The Central was 1921, and it was known locally as the Flea Pit, because it was a cinema. Who cared what it was like inside? It had this lovely classical front, but the rest was just a brick shed, and you went in. And
when was that? Sorry, what was the last cinema?
The Central Cinema has been replaced by today's cinema. The new cinema is on exactly the same site as that. Yeah, it's amazing. We took that down in 1960, and we waited all those years, and we've now built another one. Now the Odeon was the cinema, designed by Cecil Howitt, who was a great cinema architect of the time. Huge cinema, single screen, of course, over 1,000 stall seats, another 600. So it was a big cinema. But going to the cinema was terribly fashionable. It's becoming fashionable again, but we went through that phase when it wasn't fashionable, and we did all sorts of terrible things to them. But you can see it's a wonderful piece of Art Deco architecture, and this is what it's supposed to be like at night. The management of the Odeon is hopeless. And the Odeon chain is owned by the richest man in China, who owns more cinemas in the world than anybody else. He's probably never heard of Weston-super-Mare, but if only we could restore all of this strip lighting and the overhanging part, it would really look wonderful. That's what's being shown. Jack Buchanan. Plus, of course, they're advertising the Compton organ. Inside this is style. You go into the Odeon now. The kids who work there are lovely. Management's hopeless, but it's lost. It's lost that style, hasn't it? And big screen. Well, the big screen is still there. And the organ. There are only two pipe organs, theatre pipe organs, cinema pipe organs, left in the country, which are in their original cinema locations. One is the Odeon Leicester Square, the other is the Odeon Weston-super-Mare. And this works. It's been completely restored. The Jerry Molesworth rises from the pit, and they have concerts there. It's an amazing instrument, and it's there. It's still in Weston. Do we do anything about it? We should be having some major performances here. I think the one in Leicester Square is probably not in good condition, but this is in stunningly good condition. And the Art Deco central area, all of this has been nicely restored, Same era, we built the county grammar schools. It moved from Nithsdale Road. I've never seen a photograph of it in Nithsdale Road. But come 1935, we're still in this pre-war era, the county council builds a county grammar school. Well, actually it's two schools, because the boys are on this side, the girls are on that side. And when I was a pupil, of course, the only place you could meet was the clock tower, because the hall doubled up, but a big wall went down the middle, so boys that side, girls that side. But on special occasions, the wall came back into, and you see the girls on that side. I never knew that. And it was an extraordinary building, and very much from the 1930s, but not maintained, and so it came to the end of its life, and it's been replaced by the present Broad Oak School in that Tesco style of architecture. You wouldn't know whether it's a school or a supermarket. Interestingly, the grammar school had the option of either having a clock tower or a swimming pool, and they chose a clock tower. With 4 clocks, all of which told different times. They were never coordinated. And it was the same era that, again, the county surveyor designed the new law courts in Weston Magistrates Court, 1934. Listed building, so that can't be demolished, even though the magistrates no longer use it. But it was part of an entity, because next to it there were these delightful police houses, which were part of the whole style. They, of course, have since been removed. Then that awful police station was put up, and that's been removed. And because I'm not quite sure what to do with it currently, it'll become a temporary car park for the next year or so, until Homes England come up with an idea for residential development. But we've lost the entity by removing those, because they were part of that. And Bourneville School, okay, it didn't appear until 1941, but this had been designed before the war. So again, you can see it's that classical style. That's since been removed, and the new Bourneville School's there. So let's move from that era of self-confidence into post-Second World War, and this is a period of utter nonsense. We'll start off with the nonsense, though, that went on before. 1864, the Breandown Harbour Scheme. The idea that we could build a harbour at the end of Breandown and attract all the transatlantic traffic. broad gauge trains to Weston-super-Mare, a railway line from Brean down right the way to Uphill, joins the main line, and hey ho, who wants to go to Liverpool? The whole thing started, money was raised, an Act of Parliament passed. This is the same site today where the Napoleonic fort is. And here's the laying of the foundation stone. The paddle steamer Y had difficulty coping with the tide, sort of buffeted. People were terribly sick on board, but the foundation stone was laid. 2 days later it got washed away. The person in charge of it, the man who started, was Sir Eardley Wilmot, who lived at Swiss Villa. Swiss Villa is no longer there, but Swiss cottage next to it, which was the gatehouse, is still there. So this is where Sir Eardley lived. He'd been a member of Parliament. He was a chum of Brunel, and Brunel stayed here whilst building the GWR through Weston, or the B&E through Weston. That's the site today. That house is gone. That house is the Gate Lodge, and it's still there. Swiss Villa was there, but that estate has now gone. It's sandwiched between Stafford Road and Swiss Road. So that was the big house. They were going to design this to look a bit like Blaise Hamlet in Bristol and Henbury, but that's the only bit that materialised. The rest didn't. It's a wonderful scheme. We love talking about trapping the water in Weston. So this scheme, 1888, was designed. They even got an Act of Parliament for it. This huge area. I've coloured it in so it's easier to see. Grand Atlantic Hotel, bang in the middle, because the owner of the hotel is the one who submitted this application. So there it is. No idea of how they're going to clean it out. It's just a concrete wall to trap the sea in. The idea being, every time the tide comes in, it'll wash the mud out. Yes. Local doctors were up in arms about it. It will trap all sorts of things we don't want trapped. Here's another one. This is even grander. From Knightstone right the way across, there's the sanatorium. This huge area and again, people put money into it, and it failed. Well, didn't even get away from the drawing board. So let's cut our losses and have a smaller version. This is a round one from, here's Richmond Street, Regent Street there, down to Edinburgh Park. This enormous elliptical thing. Again, it never left the drawing board. And this chap, Thomas Warwick, he went around the country. He'd been to America, where they had created the revolving tower. The idea being that this thing goes up to the top and goes around, a bit like the post office tower became in London in the 60s. He was the engineer responsible for it and proposed building this in Weston. Here's the one he actually did build at Great Yarmouth. So that's what we were going to have at Knightstone. But he received no financial backing. He thought the council were lacklustre in not coming forward with cash, and so his design remained a design. But somebody's recently written a book about Mr. Warwick's revolving towers. Then the pier. Okay, it was rebuilt in 1930 after the fire. So here's the pavilion as it was in 1947, and the owner of the pier, Mr. Brenner, decides he wants to enlarge it. So he puts in an application to build a concert hall there. So we've got the pavilion there, which is an entertainment amusement arcade. Build something on the north side as a concert hall. Then he thought, well, let's build another one on the south side, and that can be an ice rink or a theatre. And let's add bits like that, widen it, more development, and let's get a public shelter and arcade at the front. So one plan after another, and it never worked. So he never did it. Another one coming up much more recently, the idea of an Ocean Earth project in Weston, 1991, never left the drawing board. The ski dome out towards the motorway, 2013, never left the drawing board. The proposed Eden Hotel on the seafront, never left the drawing board. The Grand Central Hotel, well, that was built, but only up that high. So all the rest of it. I mean, this is a major London hotel, isn't it? Which was proposed for the Grand Central in Weston. The architect was Sir Henry Tanner, I've forgotten his name. I've just looked. I've written there. Sir Henry Tanner. This was a proposal to rebuild the Beach Hotel. The Beach Hotel, it's no longer called the Beach Hotel, but this is the pier coming off here. This is Regent Street, and that's where the original assembly rooms are, the reading rooms. All finishing off the bit that was bombed in the war at the end of what is now the Grand Central. You know, this glass house is there as you go around into Richmond Street. But again, that scheme never left the drawing board. And much more recently, Mr. Wahid Samadi's scheme for a replacement 10-storey block of flats on what used to be the Royal Pier Hotel. That has not left the drawing board. Neither has he paid his debts to the council, now about £140,000. There we are. And this, which I'm going to cover unbelievably quickly, a garden city by the sea. After the war, we wanted to get rid of all Victorian things. We wanted our brave new world. And so Weston-super-Mare brought in two of the finest urban planners of the era, Lionel Brett and Bertram Clough Williams-Ellis, who of course was the man from Portmeirion. And they decided Weston was boringly Victorian. The best thing to do with it was demolish it and build this completely new garden city by the sea. Those plans are unbelievable. It meant, for instance, the boulevard would be dualled, so the north side of the boulevard demolished, the road twice. The whole idea being everybody is going to have a car. Therefore, we will have dual carriage roads coming right in to the seafront. We will accommodate a car. We'll obliterate everything that's in the way of the car. Edinburgh Park would have a road down the middle. Railway station would be rebuilt. Alexandra Parade would be extended. Where Tesco is now, that would be a bus station. This is in a bit more there are only very rough maps left, and all the rest I think were lost later, but I've coloured them all so they're more easily understandable. This is Drove Road today. This is Locking Road, Winstoke Road, the gasworks. If anyone wants a copy of that, I can give it to you, but it was a major plan to demolish Weston and rebuild it. Blocks of flats, that was the way to live. It's the era of Le Corbusier, and we all want to live in the sky. We don't want messing around with gardens. We need public gardens. Here, Alexandra Parade is here, extended right the way around to the railway station. The centre still there, the town hall still there, the bus station where Tesco is. And Boulevard, twice as wide as it is, straight the way through, demolishing West Street onto the seafront. Winter Gardens left alone. Italian Gardens left alone. A whole section behind a High Street demolished for car parking, surface car parking. And these are Mercury photographs of the exhibition. I have never been able to find any proper photographs, and I think the model was just lost. Such a pity. But all I've got are these very poor quality newsprint photos, blocks of flats 6-7 stories high, all along the seafront. You can see the whole revolutionary. It smacks of Soviet design to me. So, get rid of that. In the process, though, they had acquired all of the Carlton Street area and started demolishing Carlton Street to make way for this. So that plan never left the drawing board. Here's the next one, 1961, by Chamberlain Powell Bonn. This is the Dolphin Square plan of 1961. This model is in the museum. It's fascinating. And I've annotated it by showing what was intended then. Town Hall is here, Emmanuel Church, so Oxford Street going to the seafront here, Beach Lawns there. So all of this is today's Dolphin Square area. Demolish the lot, build a new conference centre, build apartments, the bus station remains, and then you build a great big hotel 20 stories high, where the Premier Inn was later built. And looking like this, here's the hotel, so that today would be the Premier Inn. Bus station is now that brick block of flats, Grand Atlantic Hotel there. Church Square funny enough, we have just named Church Square. Emmanuel Church there, car parking, town hall there, and this huge conference and entertainment centre. Weston thought the only way ahead was to become a conference town. Of course, everybody jumped on that bandwagon. And now conference towns are no longer at the seaside, they're in cities. It's changed. So this is what it would have looked like. Again, just I've coloured it up. And to put it in height context, this is the tower of Emmanuel Church. That was the projected height of the conference centre. And that's what the hotel would have. Interesting, the bridge which was built across the beach lawns, which I showed a couple of weeks ago, would have gone into this hotel. The bridge was built, the hotel was never built. They took the bridge down, the hotel was then built. But the hotel which is there now, compared with what this was going to be, I mean, the present Premier Inn is bottom end of the market in terms of architecture. So that plan failed. Next one comes in by the Simon Wimpey Corporation, and this is the plan that actually was completed. This is Dolphin Square completed, minus, of course, the bridge, and at the time the hotel was not built. So we then demolished the whole of Dolphin Square and built the hotel. Life is such a hoot. Nothing is ever called. It's nobody's fault. It's not. Just life is like that. Well, sometimes it is people's fault, but not always. Then other developments we've had. Well, this lovely photograph which Ian Hurd took of Silica. If you call it the carrot, you must do, I suppose. But actually, it's more like a turnip. It's nothing to do with a carrot. It's the wrong. But that's something which did leave the drawing board. That was by Wolfgang Buttress, an internationally acclaimed engineering artist. Trouble is, as is typical, the site is not maintained. It looks ugly and the lights don't work, and it's just. But what were the alternatives? Well, the original idea was that it would have been like that, and much higher, and much more slender. The idea being you could see it from Wales. But that gradually changed. Mind you, the other options were that, that. These were because the money was coming from government. It had to be put out to an international artists tender, and we had 5 to choose from. The best got through. So these are the others. And forget that now, let's go on to the church. Seriously, but no, the church was at the same game of trying to build things which would never leave the drawing board. Here is the plan for St Paul's Church by Clarence Park. I mean, this is a city cathedral, and that's what they ended up with. And that's even huge by today's standards. Or Sunnyside Methodist Church. Well, they never actually built it. They built that bit, which was the hall, but that became the church because they could never afford to build the church itself. So that is the Sunnyside Church that was in that road. All Saints Church, St Saviour's Church. That was going to be 800 people. Unfortunately, it wasn't built by the end of the First World War, and on the whole, churches which were not completed by the end of the Great War were never ever going to be. Men had come home and faith had had a serious knocking. So this building was never completed, and it ended up like that. That's truncated, which is what's there today, and has since been converted into a block of flats. It would have been much longer. So it was just whittled down. St Jude's in Milton was going to be extended. That's what it is today. It's now the Greek Orthodox Church, but it was never extended. Victoria Methodist Church. This was the original plan. It was never built like that, and it's a cathedral. But that was built. Unfortunately, that burnt down in 1930, and so they built the new one in this rather lovely mellow pattern stone. Odd building, but the tower is particularly beautiful. Quite why Methodists have built a tower, because they don't have bells. No point, but it's attractive. And then we come to the final fling. We're now reaching absurd levels. This is C&M Estates proposals for Burnbeck Pier, October 2013. I'm not going to dwell on them because we can simply laugh. It's complete and utter nonsense. And there were then all sorts of other fantasy ideas that people came up with, and I just finish off with these as it's Edge Bullet Train. I mean, okay, if you want to go to Tokyo, but really Burnbeck Island on a bullet train. And as for that, I mean, I don't think these were serious. I think they put out to architecture students. But this was an idea that a man who wanted to acquire Burnbeck Pier and still wants to, thought he could convert the car park at Madeira car park into that, and put that forward as something we should seriously look at. I mean, this is a child playing with a computer, isn't it? Mind you, the council times, I mean, this would have been the town hall extension had this company's plan been adopted by Woodspring, but the present town hall extension is the one which and the advantage of this one would have been, of course, a significant entrance into the town hall, rather than what we currently have. It sort of doesn't quite know whether it's an entrance or a tradesman. It's just not interesting design, but that the cheaper version was built in the end. And then 2000, the town council hit upon the idea of having a marina, and everyone said, it's fantasy land again. And this is the year 2000, and it just again didn't leave the drawing board. And even here, Milton Quarry, here was a plan, and I quote, "When Milton Quarry closes, it is to become one of the largest sports stadiums in the country." So where people live in their modern houses now, the old Milton Quarry site, that was going to be a sports stadium. And here's the Mercury report. Then we must end with the Tropicana. And all of these plans never ever left the drawing board because they all were nonsensical. They didn't stack up in terms of business. They didn't stack up in terms of car parking provision. And so one after another, lots of lovely computer-generated pictures, but not one of them made any sense at all. And finally, of course, Banksy comes along and has the final laugh by turning this derelict site into an art studio with no publicity at all, and it sold out. It was an amazing exercise in how to attract people to something which is falling down and paying good money. So it was unbelievable. And I finish with Banksy's lavatory roll, which probably sums up a lot of it. Next week I'm going to look at architecture and the heritage of our architecture in Western Sydney and how that might lead us into having a more appreciative view of some of the good stuff we have. And I'm pleased to say I have just been made North Somerset's Heritage Champion, and you will be the first people I address next week in that room. So see you all next week.
What happened to all the Banksys, all the architecture in the
All the Banksy stuff belonged to them, so they took it all away.
Oh, they took it all away.
Yeah, the only thing they left was a windmill thing, which we have, the council has, we own it. But the big question is, where do we put it? It's because if you put it up where it'll be vandalised.
What about Princess Parade, maybe?
Sorry?
Princess Parade, at the front.
It's
where the
yeah. I mean,
where the old clock tower.
We were thinking of putting it on the Italian Gardens, but looking at the gentlemen who were out there tonight enjoying their beer. Okay, right. Enjoy a sunny evening.
Thank you.
Can I give you my email address?
Yes, do. And this is for the farmers. Yep, okay, yep.
I don't mind, sorry.
We'll be here next week. Only a week.
When you start the first time.
When you got one on your box,
Did you get it? 30, oh, still young. It's like being at Christmas time. No, sure. St. Peter's? Yes, I have. Oh, right, okay. So you want St. Peter's But you want St. Peter's and the old farm? Okay, yep, we'll do.
Send that link out to everyone. Get Graham Smith to all the contact details. That's the I might have a bit of, he's trying to remember everything, just send it to everyone, because he's got everyone's email address, just to send a link out to the slides.
So I have to send it to every individual.
a big picture or a smaller thing.
No, because he's got everyone's email address.
I'm going to you told me I'll send it twice to everyone.
No.
It's back 1930s, isn't it?
The one building, the one
I mean, you saw my two pictures
for meeting
that I got in.
where you've got
They're not towards the original.
Yes.
Page of that.
Yes,
Because it was 16 years old.
Yes,
Worth what you paid for
the
it.
new one actually is on that
Yes.
site.
I am the only
The room.
I've sort of just put together a few bits of paper, which
the only
and of course
What we doing?
advertiser.
there is somebody
You're the only ambassador. I mean, the others are doing their bit,
all the
but
meeting
they're a
houses
bit
in
more
England.
in-looking.
And he's made a few mistakes, but basically
So you're
sort of showed how
the face of
because it was one of the casualties of the 1942
Indeed, yes.
bomb, and was
The
only
thing is,
rebuilt.
But I've never seen that.
If you want to use the image, unfortunately, we put together the Frames House in London
Yes.
and get permission to use it. They
Oh,
can
yeah.
hold copyright
You know it,
very
no.
restricted, so, but
Fully
they do
loaded.
have-
Yeah,
Can I borrow this?
You can have that.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, but
I don't know
you need to use the image.
Yes.
But that fascinating building,
That's
what we don't know is who the architect was for the current building. Which intrigued me. I haven't managed to, I mean, I'd love to have the time to try and explore it.
That's what I
We need to get
yeah, exactly.
Post town country planning act, so now
No help right now.
Yeah, no.
I bet it's in the record office at Taunton.
Yes. I mean, I haven't got
It's a question of time.
It is
Yes.
time. It's Bathstone.
So,
It's
I need
it's a substantial building.
Anyway, yes, you're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Have
Have you seen that before? The
I think-
meeting house?
I think one of the issues you're going to have is if someone comes in,
I love it
are they allowed,
when I find things that I didn't know about. Yeah.
or are they going to be prevented from doing the job?
Oxford Street.
Did you know that Diana Dawes' brother was a clergyman
Committees and things like that.
in Swindon,
Yes.
Canon Flock?
Yes, but how open-minded are the committee to letting people do this?
Right. Sorry?
Tuck.
Oh, yes, you're a different person. Yes.
He is.
No,
yes,
Tucker.
Absolutely.
We lost.
I've got a letter from one of
Robert
those
Flick.
priests congratulating my parents on my birth.
He was a very eccentric clergyman.
Oh, he was in.
Brilliant. Oh, lovely.
I just remember having checked by
The seat where isn't it?
No, I've not seen
No,
that.
no, no, no.
Because they didn't want
He
to
did,
go on
yeah.
lecture.
Yeah.
building seafront at Claremont Crescent.
I think
I think that's probably the Marine Lake.
Yeah. Not a by-election. So we'll do now.
You got leaks behind it.
Do a non-safe scene to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And now
I think they're building the
You
extension.
think this is 1928?
Nothing to do, yeah.
I would think so.
Well, it was his
I don't
life,
think it's
wasn't
original.
Ah,
there's
of
something.
course,
they're building
because they're
the
building
gardens.
they're building the. What are they doing? Are they creating?
Yeah.
Are they creating a bandstand from the gardens?
Or is it the terracing?
Because the Roselle.
I'm not sure what he's
Yeah.
doing to run back on.
I think it's all part of those gardens.
I hope it is.
I'll send it over later.
Do, because we could try to date it from the Claremont building, and yes. Do send me a comment. Yeah, I've not seen that one before. Great stuff.
It's creating.
I had the joy of sitting in the committee.
You actually knew that?
Yes, he didn't
Right.
have any sense of humour whatsoever.
Right.
It would be interesting.
You know, when you consider Diana Dawes,
Yeah.
total opposites.
And she was such a voluptuous blonde bombshell.
Yeah.
I've got one picture of her on Burnbeck.
Oh, right, yes.
I've got one picture of her on Burnbeck.
Bye. Bye.
See,
Bye.
but I want that picture of her in a pink convertible car. I do have one picture of her. And I've got pictures of other celebrities. Somebody gave me that the other day and said,
Oh, that's the, yes.
yeah, and they said, where is
Hang on, let me just, okay, so now we can see.
is the reading rooms that it refers to?
The reading rooms where I still call it the Beach Hotel, Wariat's reading room. It's that complex, rather run down, just in front of the Grand Pier.
It's the what is the sweetie shop?
Yes, the middle
Right.
bit of it is
Right.
Wariat's
Pauline,
reading
please.
room.
Pauline, please.
Yes.
Luigi's.
Is it? Yes, it's one of the. I mean, all things have been so badly maintained. But that was Wariat's reading room, and it became an assembly. It was an assembly room. So it says here published by Powell's Royal Assembly. Powell's Royal Assembly Rooms. There were several assembly rooms. Wariat's was the first. There was one in High Street as well. Powell's Royal Assembly.
I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I've listened. Right. That's something.
It's an old Westonian that's come to me and said, where was that place?
That's something to sort
And I said,
out.
I've no idea, but John will know.
Put that into the future tense. Yes.
Good night.
Right. I will do my best. Good night. Okay then.
Good night.
See you next week.
Krista sends her apologies.
How is she?
She's, well, to use her word, she's had a hard day. We went shopping this morning.
Yeah.
And it just drains her completely.
Shopping drains me, but that's
That's true, yeah.
It's
it
a
does
horrid
really.
pastime.
Yeah. And,
Oh dear.
yeah, she's having good days and bad days, which is half of the course.